Well, let the rotting continue, friend, while I impress and amaze you with magic!
Magic? Can you make yourself disappear, SpongeBob?
Ah, silly Squidward. I won't learn vanishing spells until I become a level 10 wizard.
Cue the intro! Ahoy, mateys, and welcome aboard to the only podcast that truly screams for ice cream, especially when it's made out of squid.
Your ice cream, monsieur.
Oh, thank you. Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, God! I'm ready! SpongePod Squarecast. I'm your captain, Captain Eric, and it's a pleasure to welcome you aboard as we continue our sail through the 4th season of SpongeBob SquarePants. Today's episode is Hocus Pocus, a 1993 film directed by Kenny Ortega, and played the same joke last week. Isn't that interesting? 2 episodes back to back, named, or at least you can point to other pieces of media that share that same name, The Thing and Hocus Pocus. I found that interesting, and both movies I pleasantly enjoy. Just a piece of trivia you don't really need to know, but I've been an early adopter of the Hocus Pocus movement of people who haven't seen it. You should watch this. And now in some ways I regret being a part of that movement just because of how massive Hocus Pocus has become. I love it in some aspects, but in other ways, good Lord, it has blown out of proportion. I love the movie, but come on now. Regardless, Hocus Pocus, the SpongeBob episode at hand, was an absolute delight after 2 incredible days, 2 nonstop incredible days that I've had. And before we get into the episode, I have to mention a little side piece of SpongeBob trivia connected to an event that I went to this past Wednesday, April 12th. I can bring anything back to SpongeBob SquarePants, and I would put that to the test. You give me an actor out there, and I can connect it back to Tom Kenny or someone who worked on SpongeBob and bring it back to SpongeBob so that we can appropriately talk about it on a podcast about SpongeBob SquarePants. But on the 12th, I attended an event called A Night in Mission Hill, an event hosted by @ThisMyShow, which brought together the creators of Mission Hill, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, to bring together a night of Mission Hill to show their love of the show in behind-the-scenes information, to give the fans a chance to win pieces of memorabilia and host trivia. It was a wonderful event, which also showcased the real life inspiration for one of the characters who actually showed up in person. The Tom Kenny connection here is that Tom voiced one of the characters on the show, Wally, who, here's a little piece of entertainment trivia for you out there for the aficionados. Wally and his partner Gus shared the first kiss between a gay couple for animated characters on television. I don't think before then 2 male characters shared an intimate kiss as Wally and Gus. 2 characters that are unforgettable. I love this show so much that on my day off, and I knew this event was coming up a week or 2 in advance, but it's something that normally I would pass up because of the amount of time, the money. It is a lot of effort to put forth, but for a show that has resonated in my mind for 20 plus years, I had to do it. So through about 5.5 or 6 hours of driving, heading off to Brooklyn, which, you know what, maybe it was after seeing the Super Mario Brothers movie recently that when there was a chance to drive through Brooklyn, the home of the Super Mario Brothers, I leapt
at that opportunity. There really isn't many events like this that I would trek out to on my own. Normally, if I'm not already invited to something, if there's an event that catches my interest, I'll try to find someone who is interested in that as well. So, it's always fun to go with someone to those events. But for Mission Hill, the one friend, my best friend Alex, who we bonded over that show when I had it on DVD and we watched it over and over and over again, he had moved recently all the way to another state, so he was out of the question as far as attending this event. So you know what? I said, with everything going on in the world, in my life, personal, inward, outward, whatever, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to take a nice drive to Brooklyn, attend this wonderful event, which for all of that buildup, let me tell you, I had a wonderful time. It was an absolutely wonderful experience. And for someone who appreciates and loves animation as much as I do, there aren't many circumstances in which I can personally one-to-one support those who work in animation. Now, that's not to say that I can't go out and I try as much as I can to purchase the art of those who promote it on Twitter, those on Instagram, other sources out there. But to actually get to meet one of these individuals who had a hand in creating something that has had a profound effect on my life, I don't get to do that often. And when it does happen, it's usually at Comic-Cons, if ever. All that being said, by the time I got home, I was more than satisfied with my experience. And if you ever have an event taking place around you where, even if you need to go alone, if it's something that means the world to you, life is short. Don't let these moments pass up, because you will continually kick yourself in the pants for missing out on it. I promise you that. But on to today's episode of Hocus Pocus. I had a blast with this episode, more than I think I would have expected. I thought I knew this episode inside and out, and there was one aspect that caught me off guard. This is the second half of the 76th episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, and it first premiered in the United States on January 15th, 2007. It was storyboard directed by Casey Alexander and Chris Mitchell, who wrote this episode alongside Stephen Banks. Our animation director is Alan Smart, our technical director is Vincent Waller, and our supervising producer is Paul Tibbett. Yippee! Right out of the gate, I have to say that this premise is one of my favorite SpongeBob premises to start out an episode with. SpongeBob getting into magic. We'll get into the stuff that happens before the magic kit is delivered, but the idea of SpongeBob getting a magic kit and then something happening to Squidward, that can go in so many different directions. You can take that premise, turn Squidward into anything, which then whatever you do with Squidward at that moment in time is your comedic ball that you are rolling down the hill. It's your job to make sure that ball collects something along the way comedically, you'd hope. Or, without even turning Squidward into anything, you could have turned Squidward into nothing. But the idea that SpongeBob gets into magic is such a wonderful little moment to start out with. But an even more beautiful moment to start out with is the way that this episode opens up. The cold open here is SpongeBob making popcorn, but not just any kind of popcorn. SpongeBob is making stovetop popcorn, which is by far the most underrated way to make popcorn. Most people will usually just grab a bag of popcorn, throw it in a microwave, press a few buttons, and call it a day. And then there's so many variations of what you do with that popcorn outside of the microwave. But for the actual making of it, I find that when you are over some sort of open heat source. It doesn't have to be a stovetop, it can be a campfire. But when you have that kind of popcorn, I don't know, the taste of it is just different. It hits different. It slaps different. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. And fact is that even SpongeBob SquarePants seems to be on that train.
It's factual. Can someone put it on the computer?
I may need to figure out what company of popcorn SpongeBob is purchasing from because, wow, that is a ton of popcorn to come out of one single packet, one little stovetop container. Maybe due to the pressure they're experiencing at that depth of the ocean, you can place more popcorn kernels per package. But either way, it fills up the entire pineapple. SpongeBob and Gary are ready for movie night. This is the only disappointment I have with this episode, is this one little bit, this one opportunity of any movie parody, any little moment of comedy. And I don't know if it's a movie or a TV show that SpongeBob is watching, but either way, it's called Bikini Bottom Car Wash. And it's just seemingly a washer at this car wash pointing somebody out going, that bro is trouble at any car wash. And then it cuts into a commercial break. It seemingly announces the commercial break, which is really funny, as if there's an emergency broadcast going to interrupt this movie. There's an apology. We're interrupting this broadcast of Bikini Bottom Car Wash for this infomercial for this magic kit. So, just to reiterate, the car wash bit, it's kind of funny, but either way, just if you have that second or two, I don't know, I feel like any other connection to the overall magic plot or even some sort of quick little bit about somebody disappearing would have been kind of funny. An old school horror movie. SpongeBob has been known to watch some classic sci-fi and horror movies. There could have been something there, but Bikini Bottom Car Wash definitely would be a channel changer for me, because it sounds exactly like the opening of this infomercial, which finds this poor citizen in Bikini Bottom, which you've all seen infomercials which start out like this, where it's deadpan on a person, and it might not necessarily be about them personally. This commercial opens up about this individual's personality. Your friends call you boring. They call you dull. You're looking to be cool. There may be infomercials trying to sell you something about your odor, and it may zoom in on somebody's armpit, not without clothing on or anything, with clothing, but either way, there's infomercials that may focus on a part of a person's head or shoulder, something that's selling you shoes and it's focusing on their feet. Either way, it's definitely something that happens when there's a commercial trying to sell you something. Here's a person looking or being one way, and then this is how they're going to be wearing this or purchasing this item. In the case of this infomercial, it is selling magic, but not just any magic. This is Mr. Magic we're talking about, and he has a magical magic kit that he wants to put in your hands, because there is nothing cooler than a magician.
You lie! You lie! You're lying!
Now, there are certainly variations on magicians out there, and variations on cool magicians. Certainly this store-bought entry-level brand of magic tree isn't going to win many friends over, but all true magicians have to start out somewhere. And eventually, if you work at your craft, you will have the tricks up your sleeve to wow any crowd of individuals. It doesn't have to necessarily be your friends. The world of magic isn't about making friends. It's about wowing an audience, changing their expectations, and creating a unique experience, not only for yourself in the world, but for others watching your craft. At my core, I enjoy magic. I do know that it's all an illusion, but that's the beauty of it. I like to see where somebody can take a trick, even if it's a trick that has been done countless times, but to see where they can take it in that new way where you have no idea how they could have possibly pulled that off. Of course, look no further than any one of Penn and Teller's television shows to see magic at hand. Of course, their popular Fool Us show, which does just that, brings on magicians in front of two of our greatest magicians in the history of mankind, Penn and Teller, to test magical skill right in front of them live with an audience. It's one of my favorite shows to watch, to see people being able to do what they're good at such a high degree in front of a live audience, and then to have those moments where even the greats can't tell how tricks are done. When you get to see those moments happen, it's wonderful. I absolutely love the Mr. Magic commercial. I think it's the right level of cheese.
That's it, cheese.
And even if this commercial wasn't in a SpongeBob episode, it still feels like the kind of commercial that SpongeBob would want to throw his hard-earned money right at the screen, right out of his pineapple, into the hands of whoever is willing to accept it. He places the money into an envelope, places the envelope into a mailbox, and then rips the mailbox right out of the ground, shoving it straight into the outgoing entrance, the outgoing mail slot of the post office, right through the wall. He goes in with it, and it still takes 4 to 6 weeks for this package to get to SpongeBob's house. All of that effort didn't get him his package any sooner. And I have a relative who works with the post office, and I inquired to them if this method of placing your envelope, placing your package into a receptacle like a mailbox, and then ripping up that mailbox and shoving it through the wall where the outgoing mail slot is of the post office, would that get your envelope / package to its destination quicker? And they told me it's a federal offense. Don't try it. Please don't try it. Eric, I'm not joking. Why would you? Okay. So apparently it's not good. Not good to do that. The 4 to 6 weeks time delay title card may be one of my favorite parts of this episode, and out of all of those delays of time, 4 to 6 weeks, something so inaccurate is absolutely perfect for when it comes to waiting for a package. But now, Mr. Magic's magical magic kit is here, and it's time to unleash its magical potential onto the world. What is inside of this kit, you may ask? Well, let's start off with the Book of Spells. Stay away from page 47, but keep an eye on page 42. That's all I can tell you about that book. A Wand of Whimsy and the Beard of Rasputin. Of course, one of my favorite pop songs of all time, and not necessarily the greatest guy in the world, but hey, nonetheless, what an iconic beard you have. But alongside of that is an ID to perform magic. SpongeBob now has a license to kill. Literally, in his world. Next door, Squidward is enjoying his day off in the sun with some brine soda, some seaweed what he calls crisps, but they look like French fries, so maybe that's just what they call them underwater, which is weird since they call them French fries, I believe, at the Krusty Krab, or just fries. Then there's smooth jazz to complete the trifecta of Squidward's day off. But of course, right as it starts, SpongeBob begins. And he has a magic trick that he wants to show Squidward that involves a card. There is a bit right in this part of the episode that had me almost on the floor in tears. I had to rewind the episode. It's one of the best single frame gags of Squidward, I would say, in the show's history up to this point. I would say it would be in the top 5, up there with, does this look like a face that's unsure? And you have that up close shot of Squidward's face. It's right up there with how funny it is. They could have gone detailed, but just the fact that Squidward's overall social battery gets drained the second the energy vampire known as SpongeBob walks over and wants to show him some magic tricks that he literally just learned about. And that's even a lie, because it's not even that SpongeBob learned any tricks. He just received the kit, threw on the beard, tossed on the hat, and then ran over to Squidward. Hey, Squidward, you want to see something? The second that he was distracted into the directions of this magic kit, and coincidentally, a bus stop almost right in front of Squidward's house, a bus pulls up and is Squidward's exit to make sure that his day off can be SpongeBob free. And as it does, he hops on that bus, heads off to wherever it's going. And coincidentally, and this is the moment where you could have taken this episode in any direction, and seemingly, right after Squidward hops on this bus as SpongeBob is distracted by the directions of the magic kit, a father is driving down Conch Street with his child, seemingly right after the purchase of some ice cream, some pistachio ice cream that apparently this kid had requested and then didn't want, and is now throwing a tantrum over having to be stuck with this flavor of ice cream. In most establishments, they have taste spoons that you can use to try different flavors, so I'd like to imagine that this kid had the opportunity to try the pistachio before going headfirst into it, but I have also seen situations where kids have made choices headstrong without any thought, right into them, go, and then they regret it immediately upon the arrival of whatever their decision was. It has happened before. So this kid could have just picked the ice cream based off of the color without wanting to try it, and then boom, it's in his hands, and his dad is like, no, that's what you chose, that is what you're sticking with. And that's a good lesson to learn. It's not the easiest as a kid, it's certainly traumatic in the moment, but in life, getting the wrong flavor of ice cream is going to certainly be eclipsed by many other experiences that you have in life. Not to say that they're all going to be bad, but the act of not receiving the correct flavor of ice cream that you would have wanted as a kid is not going to be the biggest deal, or hopefully it's not the biggest deal as you get older. The ice cream, the pistachio ice cream from this car, gets thrown from the car and lands perfectly on the chair that Squidward was relaxing on, right in time for SpongeBob to turn around and realize that some of the mumbo-jumbo, the magical words he was using, must have turned Squidward into this ice cream cone, because not only is it the exact color of Squidward, or close enough. The shape of the ice cream, including a big glob in the front to replicate Squidward's nose, is starting to form on this ice cream cone. It's actually one of the funniest parts of this episode, is that through everything that's happened, this ice cream cone is able to look like Squidward and then, for the most part, maintain that shape through its various melting points in this episode before it's just an utter puddle on the ground, which isn't the first time that these characters have found Squidward in a situation. We remember an episode from season 1 in this moment in time of Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, in which SpongeBob and Patrick imagine that they have killed Squidward through the means of this wax statue melting right in front of them. They've gone through the experience of accidentally, quote-unquote, killing Squidward and then dealing with the consequences. But he's not dead yet. He is not dead. He is just ice cream. There is a difference here. We are not copying an episode from the past. There is a difference. But SpongeBob, now that he has an edible friend, reassures Squidward that even though he is in edible form, he's going to continue his life just as he was going to regardless. Which means attending a movie with SpongeBob at the Reef Cinemas, which is hilarious. SpongeBob turns his friend into an ice cream cone and just goes, let's go to the movies. I'll buy your ticket. There's no way that they let that ice cream cone go in without buying an extra ticket. Because if they were going to let SpongeBob in there with a piece of outside food, which movie theaters are notorious for not letting you being able to bring out food from the outside, he would have had to have expressed that this is his friend. Which, for the movie theater, SpongeBob probably brings around a lot of inanimate objects or other things to the movies. Bubble Buddy, Gary, they probably love it. Oh yeah, all right, SpongeBob. They see him walking up with anything. Hey, another friend. That'll be 2. So we get this little montage of Squidward ice cream kind of mushing over on SpongeBob's arm at the movies. SpongeBob giving such a loving look over at this ice cream cone, as if Squidward would want to go to the movies and then would be in a situation where he mushes up against SpongeBob. That's the comedy right there of this episode. SpongeBob then putting the ice cream cone Squidward to bed, doing all of these things that he wouldn't necessarily do with the regular Squidward, or if he even knew Squidward would even want. I completely forgot. I mentioned something earlier, I think, about aspects of this episode that I had forgotten, and that was an aspect, is SpongeBob going out on adventures with the little Squidward ice cream cone. And the adventures just don't stop there. Of course, the Squidward ice cream cone has now gone to the movies. It has had its bedtime story read to it. It's been tucked in, and now it's enjoying a hot day at Goo Lagoon. Goo Lagoon. A hot day? Oh my goodness! Squidward! Of course, as SpongeBob notices that the ice cream is starting to melt, he rushes over to this lone ice cooler that is just sitting out there in the middle of Goo Lagoon, and he can't get the door open, but right as he left Squidward, another patron of Goo Lagoon rushes through playing Frisbee and accidentally kicks into Squidward. The ice cream cone, not the actual Squidward here. Reminder, Squidward is far off to wherever that bus took him, enjoying himself immensely due to the fact that SpongeBob is not where he's at. So just know he's enjoying himself. But SpongeBob now believes that this Squidward ice cream cone hybrid has been trampled through, and he has to get this ice cream to the freezer stat. With this little enclosure inside of SpongeBob's freezer, I have to imagine that it's in some way a little bit of a homage to the inside of Pee-wee's freezer and Pee-wee's playhouse. Of course, SpongeBob has a lot of his personality taken right from the character of Pee-wee Herman, this man-child hybrid of a person that we all accept because they are fun. And their personalities bring a lot of fun with them, regardless on if they're on the small screen or the big screen.
No, not at all, officer.
Ever so often on Pee-wee's Playhouse, one of the bits that could happen is of Pee-wee opening up the freezer on his refrigerator to showcase some sort of stop-motion animation of freezer foods doing something. It was always a treat to watch, and there's a little bit of some sort of an apartment made for Squidward on the inside of SpongeBob's freezer, so that immediately made me think of those moments from Pee-wee's Playhouse. And knowing how close Pee-wee and SpongeBob are, I have to imagine that that's a little bit of a homage to that. In, of course, walks Patrick. This is his entrance to the episode, and upon hearing that Squidward has turned into an ice cream, his response is a little bit muted compared to, I think, what we would expect anyone to feel like upon finding out that their friend has been turned into an ice cream cone. But Patrick is not fazed by that. Of course, you mention ice cream around Patrick, he's going to want a little bit of that ice cream. This would be a morbid joke if SpongeBob actually had the magical capabilities to turn Squidward into an ice cream cone. If that was actually Squidward. And you know what? If that was to actually happen, this kind of gag would play out exactly as it does here, with Patrick unable to control himself, even upon hearing that the ice cream he's licking is in fact Squidward. You would think after you have that information, you would stop, but not Patrick Starr. He doesn't know the term no in terms of ice cream. Hopefully, it doesn't really go beyond that. But as far as Patrick is concerned, this is a delicious ice cream cone, not their once friend Squidward tentacles. And I say that because, unfortunately, even with SpongeBob's TLC with Squidward inside of the freezer, the inevitable eventually happens. Squidward ice cream, or ice cream Squidward, however he wants to be called, has melted and is now on a puddle on the ground. With SpongeBob's anger now reaching a boiling point, he takes his sadness, his frustration out at the man responsible, at the head of this issue, Mr. Magic. And he rips up the box of the Mr. Magic's Magical Magic Kit before realizing, wait a minute, this is actually the guy that can help me in getting Squidward back. So out of that frustration leads to the idea, hey, we have to go to where Mr. Magic is located to get this rectified. So we have to follow the Sonic the Hedgehog tile road to the fairy headquarters in Bikini Bottom, which, by the way, he must be selling a ton of those magic kits to afford his own personal street, which I have to assume because it's called Wizard Street. The address is 1942 Wizard Street, and he has this custom tile road leading up to this castle with a giant wand antenna that just reminds me of something you would see out of Fairy World. Inside of Mr. Magic's castle, we are treated to a gag as old as the Wizard of Oz itself. In fact, it's something that originated in The Wizard of Oz. It's a parody of the wizard himself, where once they are inside of the chamber of the wizard, they are greeted to a floating head of massive proportions, this giant screaming head. But of course, Mr. Magic is not one to start screaming and bellowing out fire and anger. He seems genuinely impressed by this young level 1 wizard being able to turn his friend into an ice cream cone. Which, I have to say, for the inevitable reveal of this character, his response to SpongeBob's abilities is a bit muted. What kind of danger are you putting out there into the world where it's totally viable that somebody could turn their friend into some sort of inanimate object, edible or not, but then you don't know how to reverse it? We don't know what's in that book of spells, but his response, Mr. Magic's response to SpongeBob saying, hey, I turned my friend into an ice cream cone, it seems like this is a normal thing, or at least something to achieve in the Mr. Magic world of magic. As is the case anytime they parody this part of The Wizard of Oz, is the reveal of the individual behind the curtain. But in this case, it's not really an accidental discovery upon this person. It almost seems like it's intentional. They want you to discover the man behind the curtain, although he doesn't give off that impression that it's a part of the gag that you're supposed to find him. And what I mean by that is, back in the original Wizard of Oz, it was only because of Toto and being a dog discovering the man behind the curtain, there wasn't anything to distinguish that there was somebody behind there. There wasn't anything sticking out or poking out, as is the case in Mr. Magic's castle, because if you happen to look to the left, you would see this leg sticking out of the curtain, but it's not the man's actual leg. It seems to be a prop that is set up for you to discover. And I have no idea why. You would think that a guy like Horace B. Magic, the man behind the curtain, building this castle, building this persona of Mr. Magic, the floating head, and then having this fake leg coming out of the curtain, he would want to be discovered as some sort of extra prize or some sort of extra layer to this entire bit of coming into the castle itself. Wouldn't that be fun? But I'm genuinely confused by his response. It doesn't seem like this was meant to happen, and nor can he help out SpongeBob in any redeemable way other than letting him know that he's pretty filthy rich over selling these magic kits. He doesn't know any way to reverse the spell, which is pretty disheartening for SpongeBob. And I have to say, it's pretty disheartening for me to know that this guy is possibly selling a magic kit that has the capabilities to change people or individuals into other things, and this guy has not a care in the world over that. You would think that somebody with that kind of power, he would feel a little bit more like, whoa, you actually learned that from me? That could have been an entirely new way to take this character, but he's all about the money. At this point, I do have to say that I am bothered by the translucent nature of the melted ice cream inside of the jar. SpongeBob has been carrying Squidward around, and they have the cone visible through the jar. But pistachio ice cream, even melted, wouldn't really be translucent enough for you to be able to see the entire cone. I know that it wouldn't be visually the best to not see the full cone, but there isn't cows underwater, so they have to be making this ice cream with some sort of other substance that freezes up. And if you remember, in a previous episode of SpongeBob SquarePants, back in season 1, SpongeBob catches a jellyfish and proceeds to milk him like a cow, even with the jellyfish mooing, as the jelly is squirted out onto a piece of toast. The jelly of the jellyfish has been shown to be translucent, so what if ice cream in the SpongeBob world is simply frozen jellyfish jelly? And this batch was pistachio flavored. That would make sense to the translucent nature of this so-called ice cream. It's jellyfish cream. Maybe it's a different way they take the jelly and pasteurize it. I have no idea how they make milk, but either way, that's my theory. A captain's theory. Thanks for listening. Well, there's still more podcast, but either way, for now, a dejected SpongeBob and Patrick arrive back home with no other options on how to get Squidward back other than a bus dropping him off. And after having an extra day or two of a vacation wherever that bus sent him, or if he just stayed on the bus the entire time, Squidward is now back. And while he comes back over to his chair, SpongeBob starts reciting some random magical mumbo-jumbo again from the Book of Spells. Squidward takes the jar that is sitting on his chair, throws it off to the side, and then SpongeBob and Patrick realize that, wait a minute, it worked. Something that SpongeBob has said has brought Squidward back, because here he is. SpongeBob is a real magician. And right as Squidward has returned, he has offered to show Squidward more magic. Let me turn you into something else. Before Squidward flags down the nearest Evel Knievel cosplayer to hop on his motorcycle and to take off to once again an entirely new adventure without SpongeBob SquarePants. But Patrick is willing to see this magic for himself. He asks SpongeBob to turn him into a jar of mayonnaise so that he can eat himself. Interesting. Well, in what I have to believe is a homage to Wacky Deli, we now end a SpongeBob episode with a jar of mayonnaise on the screen. And even though it may not be an instrument, it seems like SpongeBob has unlocked some sort of wizard ability because he has transformed his friend into a massive jar of mayonnaise to end the episode. What a wacky episode indeed. And it certainly takes some turns and some comedic avenues that I don't think you would expect, but I had a blast watching this episode after all of the driving, after all of the work I've done around the house, which is unseen from you guys, but is certainly felt by me over these last few days. Hocus Pocus was an enjoyable SpongeBob episode for me. I had an absolute wonderful, magical time watching it, and it gets 2 thumbs up from me. Really does. At the end of the day, I love these characters, and when they're enjoying themselves or with whatever is going on, including traumatizing SpongeBob throughout an entire episode, it's an enjoyable one. This is a kind of episode where we have Squidward torture episodes. We have episodes where, like in The Thing, the sister episode to this, 2 episodes in which SpongeBob mistaken Squidward for something else. That's interesting. But unlike all of that torture that Squidward had to go through, this is internal torture for SpongeBob, having to watch his friend go through all of this struggle, all of these different states of being before melting, and then being told that you can't fix him, and he has to stay as this puddle of jellyfish ice cream, all because of you. That is rough. But then to have this ability in the end to then turn his friend into an actual jar of mayonnaise, I think that's the writer's way of, hey, SpongeBob, we're sorry about traumatizing you this entire time, but you'll in fact earn the magical abilities that you thought you had in the end. And I love that. So I'm sure this will rank pretty high during my Season 4 rankings, but we still have a few more episodes before we get to that. So until then, thank you for listening to this episode of I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast. One note I'd like to mention is that for some reason, a few episodes of this show are missing from Spotify, and I have not been able to see them not show up for other services. It seems to be exclusive to Spotify, and I have been working on the back end to get those episodes back up. So until then, if you are an audio listener, and if your streaming service of choice is missing a few episodes, it is not due to something on my end. They're sitting there in the list, and the audio is present, but for some reason they're still not showing up, at least on Spotify's end. But go to youtube.com/@thecaptaineric or click on the YouTube link in the podcast description below. That is the one-stop shop for everything Captain Eric related. Everything I upload gets placed there with extra bits and details. So if you've missed a few episodes, I can tell you that is the best place to go over and catch up. And while you're there, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's the best way to show your support for the Captain. If you would like to go a little bit further with your support, think about clicking on that Redbubble link in the podcast description below, where you can purchase a multitude of different pieces of art, all designed by Captain Eric, that you can place on any piece of product that you'd like, anything of your choosing, stickers, hats, t-shirts, anything that comes in from my projects go directly back into my projects, and it's always appreciated. If you would like to follow the Captain on forms of social media, you can do so on Twitter @I'mReadyPodcast and on Instagram @SpongeBobPodcast. I love each and every one of you on the Ready crew. Thank you for coming aboard to another episode. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time and coming aboard and being along here with me, because you make this show worthwhile. Thank you, and I hope you are having a wonderful week. If for those of you out there are struggling with anything going on in your life, you are not alone. Just remember, there are many of us out here in the same sea. We're all in different boats, but we're all out here in the same waters dealing with the same waves. So please do not forget that you're never alone out there in the world, and I cannot express that enough. As always, please stay safe, be kind to one another, and come aboard again to another episode of I'm Ready! A SpongePod Squarecast.
We can always eat them. I'm kind of hungry.
Mr. Magic was a fake, and all this magic stuff is fake. All those magic words, they were fake. Yucky, schmacky, pappy, tappy, goppy, poppy, blabby, flabby. Breakity, foo, magica, blend, magica, see, sabaca, zowie, flippy, pippy, blabberca, ding.
What are you doing, SpongeBob?